Good afternoon. Hello to our webinar on the One Identity Fabric, joint adventure by AC Consult and One Identity. Just to start, a quick housekeeping. You've all been muted. There's also no way of unmuting yourself. There's no need to. The session will be recorded. The link will be shared in a few days from now. If there are any questions coming up, we'll have 10-15 minutes at the end to definitely go through all of them. My name is Oliver Paulsen. I work for IC Consultants since 12 years, and I've done IAM projects basically with One Identity software my entire life. With me is Stefan.
Yeah, hello, I'm Stefan Hausmann from One Identity. I'm in the pre-sales department of One Identity, and I'm with One Identity for more than 10 years now. 20 years ago, I started working on IGA projects as within professional service organization. So my background is mainly IGA, but today we have a bit broader focus on the One Identity fabric. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And the focus that we will definitely talk about today. But before we do this, just a quick summary. If you're here, you probably know IC Consult is a company. So just a quick rundown. I am integrator since 25 plus years with many colleagues across the globe that help our clients to consult, to make decisions, to deploy and operate identity and access management solutions. As a vendor independent firm, we do this with different partners. So check out our website, and they are listed there. We are recognized as leaders in certain areas. Everything that you want to know about our organization is publicly available, or you can just place questions in the chat. So what will this be about today? A quick look into our agenda. So if you have checked the abstract, it mentions the One Identity Fabric. But for the German audience, this is not the Fabrik, as we Germans know what is the factory in English. It is actually the idea of a fabric as the textile of different identity and access management services that are tightly woven together. And when you look at your own organizations, you will probably agree to most of those statements, how important identities are, how complex the world of our infrastructure, of our processes has become over the years. And while we also address the concept of the identity fabric, a term that got introduced a few years ago, actually the description of it, the definition, I will leave mostly to much smarter minds. But what we will definitely also have is demoing of existing integrations, existing identity fabric solutions with One Identity solutions. And one of the smarter minds is obviously this Martin Kuppinger, and his analyst firm has worked in the field of identity fabric for many years. Latest publication is his Identity Fabric Leadership Compass. That has good definitions, good thoughts. I can only recommend to read Martin's work. Only a few are mentioned here. And what you see is that the idea of an identity fabric is mostly one that is more a paradigm, a way how we think and how we act in this field, definitely not a single product. Another of the other smarter minds is or are our friends at Gartner, who also worked in this field, who also published reports since many years. And I want to give you also a couple of statements from one of their reports. And they do it since at least 2023, and you see with far shorter sentences than the Germans. What you also see in addressing of, again, the aspect of integration of different IAM domains, different IAM solutions, and how cumbersome this can be. And there's no discussion without having one with ChatGPT first. So I also tried, and to my surprise, ChatGPT came up with some very good statements. I don't want you to read all of them. You can do this later when we share the slide deck. But you see again, it addresses silos. It introduces this word, and you will find this very often. And it addresses this aspect of it being the identity fabric, being a paradigm more than a product. And this brings me to my own personal journey in this as well. So working as an IAM consultant, I just had a couple of thoughts, a couple of observations that I wanted to share with you today. But I also wanted to share the movie Silo. If you don't know it, Apple TV Plus, great piece. You won't learn anything about identity fabric, but I'm sure you'll like it. So the oversight, there are the CTOs, there are the chief information officers, and our enterprise architects. But the idea of having a chief identity officer is only getting traction very slowly. And when you look at organizational charts, org charts of larger IT organizations, you visually see the distance that we have between the teams. And I'm not against organization, don't get me wrong. But when this leads to teams working against each other, fighting sometimes, not only security will suffer. And everyone involved in those discussions on the political spectrum, about headcounts, about budgets, you know what I'm talking about. And when you integrate your solutions, when you set up processes just for the sake of a smoother onboarding of users, instead of having this security first approach in mind, security will suffer. It's a mindset. And if you, it has more to do with the people involved than with the, but it's not something you can put in numbers. And in hindsight, when we look at how the identity industry has developed, also the vendors are to blame a little bit. Stefan, don't get it wrong, but with the scattered landscape of solutions with different products that sometimes they barely talk with each other, they didn't help for many years. Only since a few years, the idea of tighter integrations has entered the identity industry. And yes, also we as integrator partly to blame, right? So and there's huge budgets. I mean, there's sometimes not even the interest in having smarter, smoother, more tightly integrated solutions. Not on purpose, but I'm sure integrators have benefit from it. So to finish my little piece here and to give the stage to Stefan, just before that, kind of the bridge, another smarter guy, much smarter than me, and one of the others that I want to highlight today is Brian Chappell from the One Identity team. He's the head of product, who gave a speech, a talk at this year's IKE conference, the Copenhagen conference. And again, just a few impressions, a few statements from his talk. And when you watch it, what I can only recommend you doing is the idea of the one identity fabric. Partly a vision, but I know that his team is working hard to make this vision reality. But aside from that future plans, what we find in the water identity solutions in their portfolio is already many integrations that not many people are aware of. And this is why we have Stefan today, and he will introduce us to some of those integrations.
Yes,
Stefan.
thank you, Oliver. Let me share the presentation myself. Good. Now you should be able to see my first slide. So now we're going to talk about integrations, about unifying silos or breaking the silos. But before I want to go into detail how we weave a fabric, and I like, by the way, how you explain it's not a fabric in German, it's a fabric like a mesh. You can think of it as a mesh. How integration is done. I would like to basically deconstruct our fabric and go into the details of what we have, and then go forward and show what kind of integrations exist. So one identity we talk about for segments or for domains we are covering with our portfolio is the identity governance and administration part. You see it on the right side on the picture. It's the access management, it's the ID and intra-ID management, and the privilege access management. And if we dive into those silos, or I mean they're not silos anymore, but if you dive into those domains, then we find in the we see in the IGA part or the identity governance administration part, we see the classic identity management. We also see their data governance, and we see there another part. It's not listed on the slide about connectors. So it provides a set of connectors that are independent of the products, to be fair. So it's 3 components in there. If you look into the access management part, we find there some may have heard about OneLogin, others may have heard about Depender, but we find there the components that you use for authentication, that you use for multi-factor authentication, that you use for single sign-on or granting access to applications in general in that area. Looking at the privilege access management part, you find a password vault where you can check out a password. The components for session management where you don't check out the password but just get access to a server or something like that. Analytics on top of that, remote access to infrastructure via privilege access, and also ID bridging, basically saying we allow to use Active Directory to access Unix servers and use those kind of integrations. And the last but not the least one is ID and intra-ID management, where we bring everything together that takes care about dedicated management for ID and intra-ID. A few things like password reset and so on, but not go into too many details of the products. So I have a quite broad portfolio, and when we talk then about the fabric or the one identity fabric, then we must talk about how can we unify not only those domains, but also the individual components in those domains. And it doesn't really matter if the component is a product, an on-prem product, a SaaS service, because we're talking about integrating however those services are provided. It should be completely independent of the way of deployment. And to be fair, integration must be so open that also other vendors could be integrated in theory, which is of course then not done necessarily by us, but sometimes by integration partners like IC Consult. Yeah, good. So looking at those domains, what I'm trying to do now is I'm having taken those 4 domains like the IGA part and put it into a diagram like that. We have IGA, we have the privilege access management part, we have the access management part, ID management part, the same one on the other axis. And what I'm going to do now, I'm talking about what kind of integrations exist on all those kind of levels. There's an obvious layer which is within the domains. So if we talk about the IGA domain, as I mentioned, we have more than one product or more than one service on that area. So then we can start talking about what kind of integrations do we there. We have a identity management product, a lot of of you will probably know our identity manager. We also have a data governance product. So this is taking care about accounts having access to files, to folders, to SharePoint, those kind of things. And just bringing those two together brings us to another level. Like when we bring identity management, where we view on the identity and the accounts and the entitlements, and bring that together with data governance, that means we bring to the level of the identity the view on what folders and what SharePoint sites does this person have access to. It's one way of looking at it. Obviously, bringing together the IGA or the identity management part together with the connector component I mentioned before, that just provides more connectivity for the identity management. And the last one, not an obvious one, but an important one, is there's integration between identity manager and identity manager. So that allows you to connect two identity manager instances, if you like, or an on-prem instance and a cloud instance. So just think about a federated environment where you may have some kind of connectivity in between, but they are basically isolated. And that's kind of integration that's also possible. If you go down further the row, I'm not doing everything, but if you go down further the row, we see that, of course, privileged paths and privileged sessions need to work together. So if you want to have a privileged session, you don't want to have to take care of the password checkout yourself. Things like that. Also, going further, when you talk about authentication, you want to have that combined with multi-factor, which is both, for example, in the access management area. So that's one way of looking at it. But it's getting more interesting if we look into the areas where we combine it. So now if we combine IGA and the access management domain, what kind of integrations do we have there? Well, the first one is, of course, IGA is provisioning is one of the main domains of IGA. So of course, then the IGA must be able to provision to the access management solution, which of course it does. On the other way around, the access management solution is the way to authenticate any kind of access. So if you think about the IGA product, for example, or the identity manager product, you want to be able to authenticate using the end user portal, all admin tools, but also the API that should be able to be authenticated by the access management part. Same for MFA during authentication. So when you want to have MFA, should be provided by the access management. When I say should be provided, that is provided, of course. I'm talking about real existing integrations here. Another way of thinking about those kind of integrations is if you do a request on the identity management side and think about very critical access on the approval side, you want to have a second factor just for the approval of this entitlement to have a kind of step up approval for requests, but you can do also the same thing for attestations. And the last thing I want to mention, I'm going into detail in that a bit later, is what we call behavior-driven governance. So IGA knows a lot about identities, accounts, and entitlements, but it doesn't know what the user is really using. And if you then think about an access management solution, like our OneLogin, this one knows which applications users are using in the web context. And bringing those information together will provide a lot of valuable information for governance decisions on the IGA side. But as mentioned, I do that more in detail later. Looking at PAM and access management, well, the obvious ones are we're using the access management again for authentication. We use the multi-factor for authentication. We use also multi-factor when you start a session, just to have an additional factor when you get critical access. And also, as I mentioned, on the privileged access management side, we also have an ID bridge. Also there, we can incorporate the MFA of the access management solutions into that. The next one is access management, ID management. Yeah, obviously we use the authentication from access management to get access to the the tooling. We also have on the ID management side a password reset component for ID that can use MFA from the access management part. And depending on where it is deployed, because we do ID management and one of our solutions uses ID to store the tokens for multi-factor authentication, we can also then manage the multi-factor tokens using ID management. This kind of things is possible. IGA and ID management, that's a pretty interesting one, because you could think about there's a lot of overlap. One tool is managing ID, the other one is managing everything. But we see situations where, and Oliver mentioned it already, there may be some challenges between teams, like the AD team and the IGA team. It's not only AD teams, sometimes also with SIP, same story. And because we all know if your AD stops working, the whole company stops working. So they're very careful about, or same applies for infra, to be fair. So they're very careful about what's getting written into their Active Directory. And that's why you can use the Active Directory management tool as a kind of firewall. So there the ID management guys can clearly define what can be done and how it can be done to Active Directory. And interestingly, we also know other vendors that are forced to use AD management component from us before they can even write to AD. The other one is sometimes customers start with AD. The AD management tools are pretty good to clean up data in AD, and they also can do a very basic configuration of what needs to be done on the AD side, like what groups need to be created automatically, what kind of home directories or profile directories need to be created. And instead of reinventing the wheel on the IGA side, just reuse what has been done from the ID management point of view. So that's a valid configuration. On the other side, the ID management can also leverage the IGA part. Think about, you want to have data from your cloud HR system and want to use that to drive the creation of accounts in ID, then the ID management component can leverage the connectors I was talking about. They are made for more than one product, and you can use them in different areas. Last one is the last one I want to talk about. There's more than that. Is the ID management part allows you to reset the password of your AD before you even log into AD, right? That's for the AD management part. And that can also be leveraged by the IGA part. So if you ever see the secure password extension delivered with Identity Manager, that's coming from the ID management tool. It's not invented by the IGA team. Next one is permanent ID management. There's, to be fair, not that much, but as PAM also contains the ID bridge, and the ID bridge is based on accounts in ID that require certain POSIX attributes. Of course, this can be covered by the ID management tooling. In the past, we used to do just-in-time provisioning using ID management, but that has been moved to the privilege account management directly. And the last one I want to talk about, but then you already see the measures closing, is IGA and PAM. That's the first area where I personally looked into. Keep in mind, I was starting with IGA. And then I realized, okay, there's a lot of integrations between IGA and PAM available. So the obvious ones are, again, IGA is good for provisioning, so we can provision the privilege access management system in terms of privileged passwords that you can check out or sessions you can get, but also we can provision the ID bridge. Again, it's still need POSIX and attributes for accounts and groups that can be done. The other way around is IGA is also a very powerful tool. When you have access to IGA, you basically control the whole company because you can write into most or update most target systems. So, and for that reason, we can use everything that privilege access management does in terms of session access only or control session access only to all the tools, all the administration tools Identity Manager provides. So we use then the PAM to protect any kind of admin access to the IGA tooling. Same IGA usually uses a lot of passwords for connectors because it needs to, most of the time it's using passwords to authenticate if it's not using certificates. Why should an IGA solution you have passwords stored when there's a PAM solution in place? So think about every connector doesn't need a password in the IGA system, but it can use the passwords from the PAM system, check them out, use them, check them in again. And you only need to store the access to the PAM system. From an IGA point of view, it also makes it easier to rotate passwords and all those kind of things and change them when necessary, because this is usually done pretty well by the PAM systems. The next one, privileged account governance. That's also one I'm going to talk about a bit more in detail. How we do bring the oversight from IGA into the PAM world. That's something I'm going to discuss in a bit more detail. We can also do behavior-driven governance. Having said that, is when I explain the same thing for the IGA access management part, as mentioned before, I go into the details of that too. And the last one, PAM can also leverage the connectors from the IGA side to do password changes and check out passwords for more target systems. So looking at those kind of things, that's what Oliver mentioned before. There's a vision of a fabric. I would say it's not a vision. It is there. Yes, a fabric always needs to be worked on all the time because requirements change and things like that. Regulations change. DORA is now in front of us, so a lot of more requirements will be needed. But I would say we have a very solid fabric, allowing integrations between all the different areas, and that's why the One Identity fabric is so unique, because we have a lot of those integrations already. And to show you it's not something new we are doing, the next example is based on something I've done more than 2 years ago, which is the behavior-driven governance part. So in this part, we're bringing together identity governance and administration and the access management part, but it would work in a very similar way between IGA and privileged access management. To be fair, it would even be more detailed and more to do than what I'm showing today. So what's the problem here? So if we come back to the silos, and you have two silos, one IGA silo and one access management silo. On the IGA side, IGA does everything you need to govern access. It knows about identities, it knows about accounts, it knows about entitlements, and it has full control about those things on target systems. At the same time, the access management part controls the access to the application. I mean, IGA just gives the information who is allowed to do what, but access management really controls it. It's the, so to say, policy enforcement point, if you want to call it like that. And it knows who signs in and when someone signs in, how they sign in, what kind of authentication has been used, and even more important, what applications they use. So, and if you think about those things, there's a gap. And the gap is just the IGA tool doesn't know what has been really used. Because if you know something hasn't been used, you could support governance decisions. So that's what I'm going to talk about now for a while is, so what information is available? If you think about the access management solution, the access management knows about the last login of an account, right? So that's the first thing if you think about behavior-driven governance. But if you think of something like one login or an IDP in general, you have all the single sign-on events or logs. So you also know which applications have been used at which time and how often. If you go one step further and look into applications like our privileged access management, from that point of view would be an application, you have even more detailed logs telling you which functions of a software have been used. That goes deeper. And if you know those kind of things, you can start defining policies about show me accounts that are not used, Show me applications for an account that are not used. Show me entitlements, if we go one further, of an account that are not used, right? And with those kind of information, you can just highlight what's not used. And what I'm going to do now is show you how this information can be leveraged for an attestation. So something you may have to do on a regular schedule, where you have to attest if some access is still needed, yes or no. And that's now the behavior-driven governance and action part. So to set up the scene, and please forgive me, I'm using the display of our own tools, which are called Hyperview. So what we see is we have defined, we're talking about two applications. We could talk about ServiceNow, we talk about Salesforce. Salesforce, two typical applications you find in a lot of companies. So what we have done, we have defined a system role, which will give you access to ServiceNow. It's a bit more detailed behind it. Ignore the service item, and the shelf is just showing you it can be requested and who has access to it. But more interesting is what's behind the system role. Well, there's obviously a ServiceNow account. It's something you need to log into ServiceNow. There's a one login account. That's an account on the access management system, and there's a role called ServiceNow. The role gives someone having access to one login access to ServiceNow if there's an account. So that's the three things you basically need. And for Salesforce, it looks very similar, except the name is just different. Just replace ServiceNow by Salesforce. When both those roles are assigned to an identity, that means when we look at the identity, this is now our demo user. So the identity is having an account on the access management system, and basically tells you have access to those two applications, Salesforce and ServiceNow, right? That's what we have, and that's what we are looking at now. So when we do that, the first thing a user can do is use the access management system. So we have not created any data yet. It's really the first time the user is using that. So he can go to one login, authenticate. In real life, you would also use a multi-factor, of course. First time, it just explains you what you can do. And you see the users having access to Salesforce and ServiceNow. What he's doing now is clicking on ServiceNow, getting access to ServiceNow. So while doing that, that means the access management solution knows now that ServiceNow has been used once. Salesforce, that's the first time usage. The user has never logged in before, that's why it also took a second. So the access management knows now Salesforce has been used once, knows the time, but also knows that Salesforce has never been used, right? If we go now a step further and bring that information into the identity governance world, that means when we do an attestation or recertification, or it's sometimes called, and I'm the person doing the recertification for those entitlements. So I've set up an attestation as well. Just verify, does the user still need access to Salesforce or to ServiceNow? And we have the details behind that. If you know, Identity Managers looks today a bit different. The reason I'm using those screenshots is if you look at the dates, so it has been used once. It has been used once in the last 90 days. And it has been the last application usage was in June 23. So this video is more than 2 years old. And we know, just to show you how long this integration exists. So there's nothing new we did, just something we developed more than 2 years ago. So Salesforce has never been used. If I decide that I want to remove the entitlements, we have the entitlement loss, which will be calculated here, basically saying you will use the system role, you will use the role in Salesforce, and you will also use your Salesforce account. So I'm going to deny that then, and then the automatic removal would kick in. Just go to deny. If I wouldn't have checked that thoroughly as before, it would just warn me again. I would lose now some entitlements if I do that. Right, deny, and then we continue. to remove the things. I put in a command, it's not used, and there we go. Right. So this means when we think about behavior-driven governance, we see that we can use information from access management to enrich information available on the IGA side. In this specific case, we're breaking the silos by sharing information based on the API between access management and identity management. We support relevant business decisions because attestation is something businesses have to do on a regular basis, and providing this kind of information is pretty important because it makes decisions easier. In 2023, you have seen how we provided in those days. Today, the view has changed a bit, so we offer now this recommendation information where we list up all the main information, and in this case, I've just put in a screenshot to show how we would like today that it would say your account hasn't been used for the last 90 days or the application hasn't been used for the last 90 days. So behavior-driven governance provides insights or access insights to support decisions on the IGA world. The other one I wanted to talk about is privileged account governance. Very similar. It's two silos that have been connected. It's identity governance and privileged access management, of course. And to be fair, this one is even older than behavior-driven governance, older in a good sense. So there's long integration time available, which has been enhanced over time. But I'm only looking into the overview and insight part and process part. But this integration also includes now behavior-driven governance for privileged access. So you can see which accounts have been used or have not been used. But what does it mean in general when PAM and IGA are not integrated? If you think of a person that has access to via IGA to standard accounts, email, Active Directory, Entra, SAP, RACF, whatever it is for his regular access. So he goes in here, requests access for standard access or gets it automatically. On the other hand, for the privileged access management system, the person can use a privileged account. So you can log into the PAM world and use one of those accounts for web server, for database, for cloud management. Basically, very high privileged accounts, and losing those accounts is most of the time more critical than losing other accounts in terms of where you can operate in the world of a customer. It also means that if they're separated, the typical workload for request, approval, and so on is separated. So you also want to request to have access to privilege. You want to have request for your standard accounts that would also be separated. And also the overview in terms of when you wonder who has access to what. If you then look at it from a governance side of view, you know that's all my standard accounts, the accounts I'm using on a regular basis. But it's only part of the world, right? You want to also know if I have a PAM account or access to PAM, what can I do? If you think about, for example, separation of duties, it's nice what you can do with your regular account. But if you then also have access to a privileged account, you probably have a few SOD topics you need to cover properly. It's great when you have SOD on, let's say, for a SAP system and you don't have any violations for the SAP system, but then you have access to the HANA database as an admin. That would mean you can basically ignore all SODs. So that's pretty important to understand and accept the risks you have on that level. So what is now privileged or PAC? We call it PAC. What's now PAC? So basically it brings together the identity manager and safeguard. That's the name of our products for IGA and PAM. So what you want to do, you do not only want to have request and provisioning for your regular accounts. You want to do the same thing for your privileged access. So in the same way as you request access for an AD group, you want to request access to be able to check out the password or create a session for a server, things like that. Same applies then for approval. You want to be able to detect the SODs on the same level, and also attestation should be part of the process. So when you attest who has access to what, it should include the access via privileged accounts. Otherwise, it's pretty, yeah, there's a lot of things missing otherwise. On top of that, and it's just as very small activities, that's the hint. Behavior-driven governance would work in this area too. So if you don't check out or don't use the privileged account for a while, the system will notice that and ask if you still need it, because having, removing the option to use privileged accounts is more powerful most of the time than removing an AD group in terms of security. So how does it look from the IGA world? I'm using my account to my demo system. And again, the screenshot is a bit older. This is at least one version behind. So this is again my identity. Have the ability to access the privileged access management system. And what it tells me, this is the internal way of representing it. I have access to AD privileged accounts via password release policy. I leave it like that. We have other sessions following that probably go into more detail than I can do here. And it also means if I look at it from the IGA side, I do not only get access to information about all the details, I can drill down. That's what I'm trying to do in the screenshot. I can drill down to the level of privileged accounts I can check out as an privileged user. Like, so I have a demo up in here. This is and I've also the service account running in my identity manager, so I can even check out that password. Let me go one step back. So, and on that level, I would see when it comes to behavior-driven governance, if I've used those accounts, yes or no. And as part of an attestation, it would be recommended to remove that access or not if I don't use that. We have been talking so far about access requests, like I want to have access or the ability to check out a password to request a session or other things. What you can also do, you can integrate your processes completely between identity management and PAM. So you can go in and say, this is the interface for the IGA. You can go into the IGA, and if you have the ability to check out a password, get an SSH session or a telnet session, or request an API key, you can do those kind of requests from the identity manager side. It's optional, it's nothing you have to do, but for some companies, this may make sense to have all the governance processes running on one side and use then the PAM tooling only for getting the password or getting the sessions and do the requests on the IGA side. Just wanted to mention that this is also possible. And you see the details of the integrations are usually pretty deep, and this applies to all the integrations we do. In summary, as a privileged account governance, well, the main focus is to unify the lifecycle of identities and everything behind it, eliminate the silo. Obviously, it gives you greater oversight because it centralizes everything, it makes compliance more simple because it's in one place. And of course, it's also easy from a user point of view. If I go into IGA, I can request everything I want to have in terms of entitlements. And of course, it also allows me to enforce SOD and do the other things you would usually do with identity management. And with that, I would like to hand over to Oliver again.
Thank you, Stefan. Good stuff. And I have personally worked with some of those integrations. They come like rated. We see them in the field, some more than others. The need for it, the investment that clients are willing to do. My personal favorite is obviously the privileged access governance piece. And to be honest here, not only within the What Identity software stack, we do also do integrations with other vendors. But this comes with a price, of course, then with more interfaces to be built. But the pack base that the Identity Manager offers, especially is certainly helping in a lot of scenarios, especially with Safeguard. It's basically ready to run. So what's next? This session is just the start of a short series of joint approaches where we have partnered up experts from both of our companies to tell clients more about specific parts of this domain. So it's maybe less the identity fabric idea present here, but it all starts also with these best-in-class, feature-rich products. So knowing them in and out is very important. So we'll start with that in October. Andrew Etney and Abdullah Ahmad will go into details of the Identity Manager. This will be then continued by, I think it's Jacob Meloni and Rita Bachmann talking about everything related to Active Directory management, so active roles, power horse in this domain. We do have then Stefan Westphal and our Ralph Fabian, yes, talking about the access management solutions that One Identity is offering in the fourth of the webinars. And we will complete, oh, sorry, that was the fifth. And the fourth will be the PAM solution presented by Floyd and Holger Weyer, of course, Holger from the One Identity team. So with that, our session is concluded. We're happy to take questions, comments, your ideas in a less interactive form. If you have any, please post them. As far as I can see, there's none yet. But we do have a couple of questions prepared. So we can go further and use the time available. We also don't need to spend the full hour. We also have other things on our table. Every one of us, mostly you in the audience. And since there are no questions so far from the audience, let me just post one to Stefan.
You have to read it to me. I can't read it on the small laptop.
Yeah.
So no, we are taking questions you are interested in, Oliver, right?
No, I'm interested in so many things. The AI, we also hear a lot about One Identity's capabilities in the AI space. And of course, in a few months from now and a few years from now, the world will be different. But what do we have that supports this integration, that supports those things where we have AI acting? Do we know of any?
Well, if you think about everything where we control what the user is doing, like the PAM part or the access management part. So when you log in, for example, to access management, and access management does an analysis of if this is a realistic scenario, yes or no, based on locations and things like that. There's also something called vigilance AI behind it. It can be used to identify if the authentication itself is a real thing. Same for the privileged access management paths. There's there's an analytic component behind it. And what it does, it analyzes if the user behaves normal. And that's what does it mean? The user has a typical way to type, to use the mouse and things like that. So there's a learning curve where you need to get a baseline how the user typically behaves. And then this can be applied in real time to stop any kind of interaction with the tooling. And having said that, both options, they're not as integrated as like out of the box everything, but both options can signal that something is going wrong. And now assume that any component of like identity manager knows this one login account belongs to this identity, this privilege account belongs to this identity. So basically with the signaling, we are able to react on anything that has been detected and can be used to act on. Maybe it's just a recertification to make sure everything is okay, or just act a bit more drastically, like disable until we have a good reason to re-enable it again. Right? This is one way of AI involved. The other one is the classical role mining thing that's available in Identity Manager. It's not a used part of the product. It's actually there for a long while, but it's based on machine learning. So to get clusters of entitlements, that's using that. Even if you look at things like behavior-driven governance, I've done everything manually, but you could have done it automatically. So you get the data, act on it, and do actions like remove the access. Even that could be classified as artificial intelligence, depending where you are. In the beginning, it was called, it's one of those very simple agent types. In AI, it's not when we talk about today about large language models, of course. Those are kind of things where we see AI, but there's of course more coming in the future. Right?
Let's also not forget about peer group analysis in Identity Manager, approval recommendations. So we will hear about those things also in the IGA piece of this webinar.
Correct. That's also belongs into the AI segment. I see a lot of value if you think about where it makes sense. I don't like that, the whole AI thing is like used everywhere. It needs to be AI. You even find marketings that say there's a toothbrush based on AI. I think, okay, yeah, it's true. It's true. It is based on AI. But in the past, we would have just called it analytics instead of AI. That's something.
Not for the sake of AI, we do AI.
No, we do it for providing a benefit. That's
exactly. All right. I don't have many more questions, but I also don't want to waste other people's time.
Okay. Good.
What would be the behavior-driven governance demo that you gave? How much of the things in your preparation, I mean, it's 2 years ago, but how much was just working out of the box pre-configured, and how much did you add to it? What we call configuration.
Yeah, I mean, the devil is of course in the details, right? So what I have to do for this demo is enable the connector to one login, that's for sure, and then also enable the partners just read the usage data. The second one is there's a pre-configured attestation. I just had to use it. Just started. That's all I really had to do. The rest was preparing my data. That's the work. But of course, if you do an attestation on the real scenarios, you have to think about scoping and those kind of things. So there's some extra work. You wouldn't attest everything at once. So it is in a demo scenarios out of the box in the real world. You really have to think about scoping, who's getting what attestation at what time and things like that. It's probably a bit more effort necessary, but nothing complicated. Right? Just think. The main part is think about it, how you want to do it. I believe.
I actually see a hand raised by another Stefan, but I have no idea how I can give the voice to him. So maybe Stefan, you could post anything that's on your chest using the question mark. I think it's the question mark icon in text form. And I can read it out loud. Use me as your proxy. I might not be able to, so yeah. I really don't know what to do with this. And he raised, I see it on my screen, one of from the audience.
I can see it too, but it's far away from me. I see when I move forward, it means it's too small for me to see anything properly. Sorry.
Yeah. So if there are questions coming,
we can also
call it a day.
If you like.
Oh, sorry, please go.
No, I mean the other stuff. Maybe we can take the question offline.
Exactly. So if you go, I think it's one slide further. This is our email addresses, plus the one from IC Consult front desk. But I guess those questions, you have those comments. We can also have them discussed in interactions that we have here in their conferences,
Precious, yeah.
some customers, clients, partner day, user days, and anywhere in the world where we meet. So keep that in mind. Oh, there is the question, right. So to read it out loud, not sure if everyone can see it, do you recommend to use the Identity Fabric in the future instead of the additional approach? So Stefan, if you allow, I would take it in the sense of it's not either or, actually. It's more, it's less a complete different tool or complete different approach. It's more the evolving of what we have done in the past. We give things names nowadays, integrations and the removal of silos we call Identity Fabric. But if you think about it, it has always been there. Just not in that extent, especially this silo aspect and this tight integrations, this mindset behind it. So yeah, I would recommend to use Identity Fabric in the future, but it is also then the traditional IAM.
Yeah. I think
this
that
moment.
there's no difference between what you have right now and where you're going, and just reading the name. We are together in Munich, I think, tomorrow morning, so we can chat there. So there's, from my point of view, there's no difference between traditional and Fabric. It's only that whenever you think about the components you have deployed, think about the integrations you need between other components. So, and the Fabric is, let's say, more out of the box for one vendor or one identity in that case, but compared to if there's different vendors in place. So that's where the Fabric is still valid, but the integration is done on the integrator side, so more like IC Consult than one identity. If I think about that scenario, it's a different safeguard. There's a different PAM product in place, and that will mean what I've shown you about privileged access governance is something that would need to be done. If you think about what I've shown about the access management part with one login, it's very likely that we will see the same thing, not only for one login, but also, for example, for N5D in the future. That's currently worked on. Actually, the plan is to present it on the next Unite conference, integration between Entra and IGA to get the additional information, for example, from Entra for IGA to make decisions on which applications you need.
Which is important to address. I saw many One Identity customers here in this round, so everyone is aware of, and hopefully everyone is able to join us in Vienna for the One Identity conference only next year, but it's only a few months from now. And Stefan and his colleagues will be happy to shed more light on things, and you'll have the opportunity to get more deeper into those discussions.
Yeah. And yes, to answer your question, Stefan, the next one, I'm tomorrow in Munich at the same conference as you, and I'm watching your presentation.
Yeah, two Stefans, same conference with a PH, which is great. So I think it's 5 p.m. Munich time. So thank you everyone for your time. As said, we'll share the link, we share the recording, and we see us next time. Goodbye. Thank you,
very
Stefan.
much. Have a good day.